Goals of the Parc-Extension eviction mapping project in the context of the gentrification happening right now in the neighborhood are many. We're trying to support all of the actions that are already happening with the organizations and residents on the ground already mobilizing to fight for housing justice. So with the housing committee in the neighborhood, there's multiple organizations that we're working closely with to try and support their initiatives like the CAP and the CASH and Brick by Brick. And through these combined efforts, we're trying to put pressure on elected officials, authorities, corporate business owners that are all having an impact in the neighborhood to take responsibility for their role in the gentrification happening here, and also to uplift tenants' abilities to mobilize together to fight for their rights when they're being treated unjustly or evicted or living in unjust conditions or unsanitary conditions.
Le projet a commencé, donc, et qu'on a commencé à faire le travail de collecte pour la cartographie des évictions, c'est vers le mois de mai 2018. Donc ça fait 3 ans maintenant. La première raison de la collecte de données, c'est pour l'usage interne. C'est pour savoir, nous, c'est quoi la réalité du quartier à partir de nos statistiques, mais également qu'on a des dossiers qu'on peut faire le suivi, et quand elles reviennent, les premiers usages interne. Donc c'est sûr que ce soit la représentation politique ou médiatique ou le projet avec la cartographie des évictions, là ça amène à une autre dimension qui nous permet d'avoir, dans ce cas-ci, dans le dernier cas, d'avoir l'appui de chercheurs universitaires qui sont capables de produire une cartographie et de produire aussi des documents d'analyse.
Le Parc-Extension, c'est assez particulier parce qu'il y a quelques années, moi quand je suis arrivé au Reclac il y a 5-6 ans, Parc-Extension, on ne parlait pas d'éviction, on ne parlait pas d'oserie, on parlait de salubrité et de discrimination. C'était les enjeux qui étaient sur la carte là, à cette époque-là. Puis avec l'arrivée du campus 1000 de l'UDM, la gentrification s'est faite tellement rapidement dans ce quartier-là. La face du quartier a changé. Le comité d'action de Parc-Extension, qui est le comité logement là-bas, a dû revoir ses pratiques parce que maintenant, de faire face à des évictions, ce qui n'était pas habitué depuis longtemps. Donc, c'est vraiment particulier là, ce qui se passe là-bas, parce que c'est rare qu'on voit le quartier changer aussi rapidement, puis les pratiques des propriétaires changer aussi rapidement. On note vraiment une recrudescence importante du nombre de locataires victimes d'éviction. Puis ça, quand on est en pénurie, en crise du logement, on voit toujours ces tendances-là. Les propriétaires en profitent parce qu'ils savent qu'ils vont pouvoir augmenter de manière importante le loyer.
The context of housing has really changed a lot in the neighborhood. Apartments that used to rent for maybe $600-700 a month are now $1,200-1,300. There's also an enormous amount of housing discrimination we see in the neighborhood, and it tends to target immigrant tenants, poor people of color, and families the hardest. Many are really struggling to find affordable housing in the neighborhood and even elsewhere in the city, like where it used to be that maybe people could find other apartments in sort of the peripheral areas of the city, but now we're seeing repossessions in Montreal Nord, rent evictions in Cartierville, and even entire buildings getting emptied in places like St. Leonard. It really raises the question, like, where are people going to go? We're very worried that we're going to be seeing a real exodus from the neighborhood this summer and in the years to come. We also are very concerned that it'll end up changing the character of the neighborhood as a whole. While Parc-Ex is a neighborhood that deals a lot with the consequences of systemic racism and precarity, it's also a place where immigrants have built long-term networks of solidarity, and we're really worried that that's going to be threatened as more and more people are forced out of the neighborhood.
The building was sold, I guess, in July 2020, and prior to that, our older landlord, he was not paying any attention to any kind of repairs. We have faced several problems while we were staying there. In particular, we had many cockroaches. At one occasion, we have bed bugs. Then there were mice infestation, and in addition to that, there were other repairs which were exposing with the passage of time. So there were so many problems during our stay in that building. And when the new landlord, he purchased the building in July 2020, he was not polite from day one. He was threatening, harassing, and intimidating almost to all the tenants. He knocked on my door. If I still remember that he handed over me a paper saying, "Oh, you have only 5 minutes to sign this, otherwise you will be kicked by hooks or crooks," if I can rephrase his words. But there were some tenants who were undocumented, if I know correctly. He pressurized them, and they were not having previous leases, so he threatened them that they will be kicked out. So he was successful to compel them to sign a new lease at $725 for a 3.5. So he, to my understanding, he got this idea that if he used the same tactics, he can also oblige other tenants to sign the lease at $725 or roundabout.
We don't want to have displacement our community. We don't want to have destroy our community. The typical Parc-Extension is a very famous migrant population, and also 80% of tenants, more than 80% of tenants, which is characters from the low-income family. We don't want to displace people from the resources.
One reason why long-term community organizing is really important is, well, in a neighborhood like Parc-Extension, community connections are really what keep people alive in many cases, and what support people to thrive in a new city, in a new country.
The struggle in community organizations, one of the big struggles, is mobilisation, outreach. And outreach is relatively easy to do for those people in our communities that are the most confident. There are people who are like, I recognize that I need support, and I'm going to reach out and accept this service and work with these organizations. But those are people who are easiest to reach. The people who are the hardest to reach are people who don't leave their houses. And those are also the people who could benefit the most from support. So by basing our work in housing, it makes it a lot easier.
Even the food banks were shut down for the first few weeks. So it was really, we felt like, you know, we were sort of alone in this wilderness. There was nothing people really had no idea what was going to happen next. And so I think that was the benefit of the mutual aid, of it being a mutual aid network, is that we were all volunteers. We didn't have a specific mandate other than people will ask us for help, and we'll do it if we can. And we'll stay flexible, and we'll do what we can until it's not needed anymore. So when things started opening up again in the summer, we sort of, things sort of changed a little bit. It was a little bit less delivery of items. It was a little bit less food delivery, although we still had families that came to rely on us. But we were able to help people find housing, as much as possible anyway, and connect people with the networks that are in the neighborhood already, like CAPE, like Brick by Brick, that are able to help people with housing. So I was in contact with a woman, single mom, who's here as a refugee claimant. So she's waiting for her case to go through. Things have been delayed over and over again because of COVID. And she'd been living in a really bad situation. She was a roommate in like a house with multiple other people there, and as a mom with a little kid, this really just wasn't a situation that was going to work for her. And there were mice and cockroaches, and it was just not a great living situation. So through the network, through people sort of hearing about what they can do and what the real needs are, we were able to get her a lease transfer.
We feel that we are not alone. In case there is any issue, our neighbors, our community, they will be along with us. So that was a huge confidence booster for us. And for that reason, if I may suggest, for future people who are facing any such kind of issue, if they speak for their rights, definitely community is there to help them. It will not only help the people who are suffering, but it will motivate the other people who are fearing that if they speak up they will be evicted, there is no place for them to be heard. No, that's not the case. Like, there are tenant association which will guide them. There are pro bono lawyers who can help them.
I mean, I think in terms of how we try to deal with this, I mean, remembering first and foremost that relationships are key to organizing, that, you know, that first and foremost we need to be there for people, we need to be supporting, supporting tenants and our neighbors in fighting these struggles, and be there for people be consistently there for people over the long term.